residue management plays a key role. We've come a long way in corn management, and we run John Deere corn heads. And when we first started, we had just a regular fluted roll corn head, and you know that was crimping the corn, pulling the ear off as the ear hit the deck plate, and you know we were living with it. Then we were running a bush hog behind it, trying to break that corn stalk up a little bit. And now we transitioned in I think it was 17, to where we were cutting the corn stalks into segments and crimping them to where it would kind of help break the residue down a little bit. And then the thought was, hey, if you got those corn stalks on the soil in little sections or lengths, then it would reduce the windy road or the movement of the residue with wind and or the movement of the residue with heavy rains. Well, this year we've transitioned to the calmer rolls, the knife rolls, where I think they're the 12 blade calmer knife rolls, and they're breaking it up into real small pieces of residue. Now, one of the bonuses, I saw a grower that had run the 10 knife roll last year, and I watched his residue, and you know, it's not like it's disappearing in 2 weeks. It's taken several months. I mean, he's still got residue there in January and February. Now, we get a little bit of wind. Now, we don't get the winds that y'all may have in the Midwest, but we do get a hurricane, and we get big rains. But if you're into a no-till environment and you're managing whether you got terraces or you have some kind of residue there to keep the water from moving rapidly, and even the small pieces of confetti, it's not like they're blowing away. They're not washing away. And the example I like to use is you got the corn stalk there, and you got that whole root system. Now, let's say we till our wheat into that. Now, some growers say you need to plant at an angle or cross away. I'm like, it took years for my dad and granddad to get the field straight, so I'm sure not going to plant something at an angle. So we offset our planter, because everything's RTK. We offset our planter so a row's not going right into that, a wheat row is not going right into that corn row. And then when we no-till our wheat into that, it is so much easier to no-till wheat and get the right seed depth. You growers, we pay attention to soybean depth, we pay attention to corn depth. Everybody wants to be that 1 3/4 to 2 1/4 inch down. You know, whatever flavor or whatever depth you want to be, but you want to be consistent. And when we can chop that residue up into small pieces of confetti, we do the same concept in our small grain. We want our small grain to be at a certain depth. It's probably 1.5 inches. And if we have small pieces of residue, we're not getting that gauge wheel riding over big stalks of residue where we can have that consistent seed depth, just like we would corn and soybeans. And then for growers that are in a cooler environment, and you got that corn residue sitting there, and you're wanting to get into a no-till environment, and you're going to be forced to either use some kind of trash sweep or some kind of mechanism to make sure you get big pieces moved out of the way. Now here with the calmer knife roll and that confetti, you know, you don't have to be so diligent to move all that trash out of the way. You could probably get by with just your disc openers, or you may be able to get by with a no-till coulter without that trash sweep there to help. Because that's just another piece of equipment or attachment on a planter that you're having to maintain. And I try to keep things as simple as possible. Another reason we have that residue there, it's a good harbor for like earthworms, and you know, we get this huge population of earthworms. They're coming in, pulling some of the residue down into their hole, digesting it, and then it starts all over. So as we can have small pieces of residue, you know, that's helping and feed our organic life. If you've never seen an earthworm grab a piece of corn stalk or a piece of corn residue and try to pull it into a little hole, it's amazing what they can do. And I think if a grower hadn't seen that, that should be a task somewhere in their next season to see if they can observe that, because that's unique, because that's just showing you what can actually happen. So we've gotten to where residue management from the time we're harvesting our small grain. We run shell-borne stripper headers, so it leaves straw standing, and then we have the spreaders on the back of the combine for the chaff and whatever straw that goes in, and it's chopping it. You know, they have the knife chopper and then the spinners that throw it out. Depending on which way the wind goes, depends on if you have to speed the spinner up on one side or the other. Then when we go to harvest our soybeans, we have the wheat straw still standing. Then the soybean header is taking the wheat straw plus the soybean stalk and the pods and the beans in, and then spreading all that out. Then when we get into our corn harvesting, we've transitioned to the Calmer 12 knife corn roll, to where it's chopping the corn stalk into little pieces of confetti for that earthworm. Because I'm thinking, how am I going to help break down that residue quickly and help feed the organisms in the soil? The reason we want it to break down quickly is because we're going to no-till wheat into that corn residue within 2-3 weeks from the time we harvest it. So we want it to start breaking down as fast as we can, and we've done some things throughout the air learning curve to enhance that. Typically when we shell corn the first half of September, we get enough rainfall, we get enough heat that the residues start to break down. When we get later into the corn season, you know, we may enhance that by adding some fertilizer, some ammonium sulfate or some sugars or something, just humic acids, just to stimulate that decomposition, feed the biological life. And then when we transition to the Calmer knife rolls, man, that corn stalk has been broken up into a lot smaller pieces as opposed to the sections that you see it being crimped in. So that's enhancing the residue breakdown even faster. And I usually don't change many things all at one time. Well, this year we transitioned to the super chopper on our corn head. And not that I was concerned, I just wanted to make sure it was going to handle the environment that we're in. Now you got to realize, I like my combine to mature my corn crop when we get started. We're going to be shelling, it could be as much as 28% moisture corn, because we never know if we're going to get a hurricane, so we start a little earlier. And typically when our corn's still at that 22 to 24%, there's still a whole lot of green foliage on that plant. Typically, when we're doing our first half of our corn crop, from the ear leaf on up is still green. Now the kernels may be dry because we're trying to put all the energy we can in the kernel, so we're kind of helping that crop to be healthy. Well, that presented a concern of ours where we've changed our rolls to these super choppers. Could they handle it? Well, I can sit here and say, yes, we can handle chopping that 14-foot tall corn that's still green above the ear with the sap still coming out of it. And when you start talking residue management and you got a plant that still got sap in it, that's going to help enhance that. And when you start chopping those leaves that still got some sap or some green in it, that's just going to help it decay, because that's just like having a dew on it or some kind of rain event. It's going to speed up the decomposition. You know, just looking at a recap, we're still harvesting corn this season and hadn't quite finished, but just the satisfaction we've had for adding an attachment on our harvesting equipment to where we know we're going to reap the benefit from it because we're capturing more of the kernels. And then just the customer support we've had. You know, we're able to call the Calmer group, and then if we have any questions or concerns, you know, we're getting parts right away. And then as we get the installation part, you know, there's a great system for that to make sure we get it installed correctly. And then after we get it installed, you know, then we get a phone call to say, hey, is everything working right? So we got that follow-up, and I'm sure if we had a problem, they would have been here to make sure it gets fixed. So that's the satisfaction that we get. And then when you get an opportunity to talk with some of the Calmer people, and then even, you know, you go to these field days and there's Marion right there. He wants you to become successful. So he's there, he's got a vested interest in you kind of supporting some of the concepts of the technologies out there, but without your success, you're not going to be a return customer. And we're excited because we still haven't finished yet, but we see the longevity of this super chopper. You know we're not going to be putting it on this year and then having to replace it next year. We see that they're going to last for a while, especially when we're harvesting some of the green corn that we do, and now that it's browning down and we're just trying to get her knocked out. And we're just excited to continue on, and I see Calmer being part of our 2020 plan next year.